It's Friday, November 25. In the headlines, Jamaica marks International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Regionally, world leaders have agreed to establish a loss and damage response fund from the recently concluded United Nations Climate Conference, COP27. Internationally, China has broken the record for COVID numbers. And in sports, news from the Qatar FIFA World Cup 2022. This is the news on PBC Jamaica. I'm Simone Absalom Gale. Today, November 25, is International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, IDAVA. The day also marks the beginning of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, GBV. Gender-based violence is violence mainly committed towards women and girls, including, but not limited to, emotional abuse, rape, harassment, and female genital mutilation. The Bureau of Gender Affairs, BGA, will be hosting a series of activities to commemorate International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. According to a release from the Bureau, a church service will be held on Sunday, November 27 at the Fellowship Tabernacle, 2 Fairfield Avenue in Kingston, beginning at 10:30 a.m. to commemorate IDAVA. During these 16 days of activism, the Bureau will join activists on observance of World AIDS Day on December 1, International Day of Persons with Disabilities December 3, and International Human Rights Day December 10. The observance of IDAVA creates awareness on all forms of violence against women and girls and the impact on the country's development. More than 1 in every 4 women in Jamaica has experienced intimate partner physical and sexual violence in their lifetime. The first comprehensive Jamaica National Survey on gender-based violence revealed a prevalence of 27.8% women affected. Gender-based violence threatens women's right to life and to security of a person. Jamaica has a legal obligation to protect women and girls from domestic violence and sexual violence, including sexual harassment. The obligation mandated by the Constitution to protect the human rights of persons within the country extends to a positive obligation on the state to protect women and girls from domestic violence and sexual violence.
It is scary to see that the kids, they don't even walk home anymore because of the violence that is going on with the abuse of women, the killing of the women and stuff like that. And back in our days, we used to walk to and from school, but you don't see that anymore because of the abuse of kids, and it is just very, very scary.
The men them of today is very, very wicked. Because when you look at a woman that bring you here and you want to rape them and kill them, I don't see why them doing those things. Go back again and the children them, girl and boy, them raping them, then killing them, and without no cause. No reason. You don't have to do them nothing. You just go out on your own business and them just slaughter you like that. Take you and go rape you and slaughter you. I don't know, they must remember that there is a God. And they must look into their life and see how they live and know that they have a mother, a sister, and a brother. And those men that doing it, I don't believe them have a wife and children. Because them couldn't have a wife and children and have that heart.
I love my children and I love my woman them. And I don't want nobody beat up my daughter. And I don't want nobody beat up my son. I like people with discipline. I don't like. Then if you have discipline and beat a woman, you try to pursue her to be smart or sensitive more. Instead of to be ignorant or ignoramus. You'll be more responsible.
First of all, I can't even understand how you feel you have the right to hurt somebody, to batter them and bruise them and mash them up. I don't understand how you feel you have that right. I mean, we're all equal in the eyes of God and in the eyes of man. So we should treat each other better. We can't treat each other like dirt. We can't treat each other like dog. We have to treat each other with the proper respect that is due to us. So we can't go on. So we have to do better. And even the littlest thing is starting to make a difference. So whatever it takes to just make that little difference, to make change your mind, just change your outlook, start treating people with respect and love and care. And because no matter how you look at it, there is no excuse for violence. There's no excuse for abuse.
If a man continue to kill off woman and rape them and them things, that cause woman to pray against we and stop the way and them things. And without a woman, we can't reach her. We, the children ourselves, can't reach her because women have a lot of power. I mean, like, come on. You have to think about it and look into it 2 ways. You can't just pray for yourself.
No excuse for child abusers. Right now in Jamaica, we are traumatized of all the things that our man is doing to our children. They should be the one to protect our children, but they are not doing that. We want our community
SOEs now in place across 7 parishes topped the agenda in this week's meeting of the Senate. The areas under the state of public emergency consist of the entire area of land comprising the parishes of Westmoreland, Hanover, St. James, Clarendon and St. Catherine within the established parish boundaries, as well as the police divisions in Kingston and St. Andrew, except for St. Andrew Central and St. Andrew North. The government needed to convince at least one of the 8 opposition senators to break ranks and vote to extend the SOEs or watch them collapse next week. Prime Minister Andrew Holness says the Fingerprints Act will be amended, allowing certain categories of people to take prints and photographs of people in custody with or without their consent once certain criteria are met. This includes specific offences named in the Act. Speaking in Parliament this week, Prime Minister Andrew Holness, who is also Minister of Defence, says this move will have far-reaching implications for Jamaicans.
We can't only be looking to protect the right to privacy of someone who could be a criminal or may not be. But we also have to balance to make sure that that person does not escape the control of the law to go and kill someone. That's our duty in this parliament, to strike that balance. And as it stands now, with the legislations that exist, That balance is not being struck.
He notes that the changes to the Act will expand the offences schedule. The groups authorized to take fingerprints, as well as extend the time for the retention of fingerprints.
And this will be done to expand powers to the courts to order the taking of fingerprints and photographs for several offences which were not covered under the old Fingerprint Act, to expand the offences schedule, to expand the groups authorized to take fingerprints, to extend the time for the retention of fingerprints, and to provide for the use of approved modern technology for electronic taking of the fingerprint and for the storage of the data.
According to Mr. Holness, the amendments to the Act have already been discussed, and National Security Minister Dr. Horace Jang will table the new bill in short order. Director General of the Planning Institute of Jamaica, PIOJ, Dr. Wayne Henry, says the performance of the construction industry fell for the July to September quarter compared with the similar period last year. He shared the information on the development of this and other economic sectors at a virtual brief this week.
Contraction in the other construction category, which outweighed an estimated increase in building construction. The industry's performance was reflected in a 2.7% real decrease in the sales of construction-related inputs. Contraction in the other construction component was due to a decline in capital expenditure on civil engineering activities, largely stemming from National Works Agency, NWA, which disbursed $5.9 billion relative to $9.1 billion in the corresponding quarter of 2021. Expenditure was primarily for projects associated with Part B of the South Coast Highway Improvement Project, which is scheduled to be completed in March 2023.
Time now for the business report with Danita Rodney.
Jamaica Producers Group Limited, JP Group, and Pan Jam Investments Limited have announced an agreement which will see the amalgamation of the asset bases of both businesses, valuing more than $100 billion in what is one of Jamaica's largest ever partnerships. Details of the agreement were outlined in a joint release on the Jamaica Stock Exchange's website on Monday, which stated that Pan Jam will acquire the operating assets of the JP Group in exchange for a 34.5% stake. Pan Jam will be renamed the Pan Jam Jamaica Group Limited, while the JP Group will become the single largest shareholder in Pan Jam, with its shares becoming its sole principal operating assets. For your market updates, in foreign exchange trading for Thursday, November 24, the US dollar sold for an average of $154.96. The Canadian dollar ended trading at $117.22. The pound sterling traded for $187.11, and the euro sold for $163.01. In GSE trading, the GSE index advanced by 428 points, the junior market index advanced by 82 points, the combined market index advanced by 1,145 points, and the All Jamaican Composite Index declined by 1,154 points. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 97 stocks, of which 49 advanced, 33 declined, and 15 traded firm. Stocks advanced for 138 Student Living Jamaica Limited, Access Financial Services Limited, and Barita Investments Limited. Stocks declined for CAC 2000 9.5%, Cumulative Redeemable Preference Shares, Caribbean Producers Jamaica Limited, and Siboney Group Limited. Trading firm were Virgin Paints Jamaica Limited, Caribbean Flavors and Fragrances Limited, and Community and Workers of Jamaica CCU Deferred Share. The overall volume leaders were Wicton Windfarm Limited Ordinary Shares with over 14 million units, Sagicor Select Funds Limited Financial, and Sagicor Select Funds Limited Manufacturing and Distribution with over 1 million units. In regional stocks, in Trinidad and Tobago, Clico Investment Fund was the volume leader with over 70,000 shares, followed by Calypso Macro Index Fund with 34 shares being traded. On the Barbados Stock Exchange, Goddard Enterprises Limited was the volume leader with 1,500 shares. They were followed by Government of Barbados Bond Series B, which traded 1,360 shares. In regional business, British businesses looking to invest in Guyana have assured that the government and private sector will be allowed to decide the priorities of its investment. Newsroom Guyana has more.
From our point of view, the most important thing are the needs of Guyana. So we're not going to come in and say, this is what you need, because that's not the right relationship we want at all. The key word in the partnership agreement is partnership. And what we did today was we listened really carefully to the President, to his cabinet ministers as well, who were explaining to us some of the needs they think for the country. What we need to do now through the partnership agreement and the arrangements which we've made is really find out what that means in some granularity. Because I think the important thing is establishing that partnership is important, but the really important thing is the so what question. So how are we going to work together? And that's what we in the UK and the UK government are all about. We would like to introduce quality UK companies to Guyana, companies who have delivered before with experience, companies who have delivered in Latin America and the Caribbean, companies with cutting edge technology and solutions, so that what Guyana can choose from is the best possible selection.
I hear you on allowing the government to prioritize its own needs and then the UK responds to that. But High Commissioner would also know that we have an experience where foreign investors would make their own proposals to local governments. So I'm trying to understand what sort of interests are your businesses coming in with. Are you particularly interested in any area outside of what the government have asked you to look at? What would be the interest from your end?
Well, our interest is in the areas which I've mentioned to you. And the reason for that is, I think, and let me come back to the word partnership, we need to make sure that our offer matches what Guyana needs right now. And I think the areas we've talked about on infrastructure, just to pick that apart a tiny bit, we're taking a look at where we've got specialist companies who can work with roads, in construction of bridges. We're looking when it comes to construction and operation of hospitals, the construction and operation of schools as well. We're seeing whether we can bring that expertise which British companies have and have of working in the sorts of environments like we have here in Guyana, and bringing those here, giving the Guyanese government a really nice choice of companies that they can work with. Now our priority is to make sure that those companies bring efficiency, bring complete transparency, but bring quality. And I think that's the other thing I'd stress. The UK is here for the long term. Our companies don't want to come, sell something, deliver a service and then head back home. The companies we brought here in the trade mission this time around, but also the ones we'd like to bring in the future, want to have a long-term relationship with Guyana. They want to make sure that the products, the services, the contribution they make to the development of Guyana last for years.
In market data for oil prices rose in thin market liquidity, closing a week marked by worries about Chinese demand and haggling over a Western price cap on Russian oil. Brent crude futures were up 92 cents to trade at $86.26.
In regional news, stakeholders from Caribbean Small Island Developing States, SIDS, have welcomed the decision to establish a loss and damage response fund from the recently concluded United Nations Climate Conference, COP27, in Egypt. Minister Malouine Joseph of Antigua and Barbuda, chair of the Alliance of Small Island Developing States, says literally, all efforts have been exhausted to bring home the climate action commitments for vulnerable people desperately in need. He says, quote, "Our ministers and negotiators have endured sleepless nights and endless days in an intense series of negotiations determined to secure the establishment of a loss and damage response fund, keep 1.5 degrees alive, and advance ambition on critical mitigation and adaptation plans," end quote. In Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaican reggae artists Sizzla Kalonji and Capleton visited 3 schools to spread some positive messages on Thursday. The visit formed part of the Ministry of National Security's Project Building Blocks program, which has been successful in bringing peace among major gangs in the area of East Port of Spain.
After leading the children in a recital of Psalm 23, Jamaican reggae artist Sizzla Kalonji, whose real name is Miguel Collins, reminded the students of Rose Hill RC Primary School that education is key.
What you learn here, you will take with you in the future. You will apply it as you go by in your daily lifestyle. Remember now, no fighting, no quarreling, no picking, no stealing, no slandering, okay? You will be argumentative about stuff at times, but you're little human beings growing up to be beautiful persons. I would not like for you to turn on the path of violence.
Rose Hill Primary made headlines last month when a teacher recorded herself and her students lying on the floor of a classroom while gunshots rang out just outside the building. Since then, police have maintained a constant presence outside of the school compound. Through the Ministry of National Security's Project Building Blocks initiative, the reggae artists visited the school to share positive messages to the students, teachers, and lucky onlookers. Fellow Jamaican reggae artist Capleton, or Clifton Bailey III, also shared a few words.
Be yourself. It's all about self-esteem, self-awareness, self-reliance, self-thought, self-control. It's all about discipline, respect, humility, tolerance, and it's all about self-determination.
And while much of the audience sitting before them were younger than many of their hits, the reggae stars couldn't leave without giving them a taste of their music.
Thank you, Mama, for the 9 months you carried me through. All those pain and suffering. No one knows the story you're born, just only you.
The artists also visited St. Barb's Primary School and Morvant Laventil Secondary School.
In Guyana, a forthcoming model family violence bill is expected to remedy the deficiencies of the archaic Domestic Violence Act and other similar pieces of legislation. During an exclusive interview with Newsroom on Thursday, Minister of Human Services and Social Security discussed some aspects of the legislation, noting that it will introduce new ways of tackling violence, especially violence against women and girls.
So there are a number of things. We're looking at the discretionary powers of the police, and we're looking at when people could be apprehended or when people could be charged. When it comes to if someone makes a report, for example, there is some discretion where the police is concerned whether or not they consider this a reportable offense. But if there is obvious physical harm that the person demonstrates, they have to go ahead. That discretionary power is removed. Then if persons want to pursue the legal recourse, and they may have come multiple times to court, and they keep going back into the situation, there is now a discretion that the court can take it further. They don't have to wait for that person necessarily to give their permission to take it further. So these may seem like harsh moves, but I think at this point they're necessary. We're also looking at the punitive measures, which are a lot more than what exists right now. We're also looking at the definition of the interpersonal relationships. Before it was between two people, now we're looking at a more extended family when it comes to prosecution. So it's not only what obtained before in that small two-person equation. This is much more. More persons could be held accountable. So those are just 3 of the main things with the family violence bill. It, I would say, takes into account the legislations from across the world. We've looked at best practice, we've looked at impact. We've also added, from Guyana's perspective, some newer nuances to the law.
In international news, reports are that China has broken the record for COVID-19 numbers compared to records shown in April this year, leading to cities across the nation imposing localized lockdowns to curb the spread of the disease. More in this report.
China reported a record number of COVID-19 infections on Thursday. 31,444 new local cases on Wednesday, breaking the previous high set on April 13th, when commercial hub Shanghai was in a lockdown that would last 2 months. Now cities nationwide are imposing localised lockdowns, mass testing and other curbs that are darkening the outlook for the world's second largest economy. The streets of Chaoyang, the capital's most populous district, have been increasingly empty this week. Sanlitun, a high-end shopping area, was nearly silent on Thursday, but for the whirring of the e-bikes of delivery riders ferrying meals for those working from home. The surge in infections is diminishing investors' hopes that China will soon ease the rigid zero-COVID policy. That, alongside a downturn in the property market, is battering the economy. It's been nearly 3 years since the pandemic emerged in the central city of Wuhan. The restrictions have also exacted a toll on China's increasingly frustrated residents, like this Beijing local.
Only by easing the COVID-19 restrictions can people live a normal life. Otherwise, everything's halted. How many people have the savings to support them if things continually stay halted? And even if you have money to stay at home every day, that's not true living. That's lingering on the last breath of air.
In sports, every World Cup, the same question comes up. Is it football or soccer? It can lead to heated debates, but where did the word soccer even come from? Al Jazeera's Patty Kulain reports.
So let's pay attention.
At this DC club, they start young.
Does everyone have their water bottle? No! Oh, come on.
And go! Here to learn the basics.
I can't believe I did that.
And even the drama.
My foot hurts.
The one thing they already know is what to call the game they're playing.
I'm playing soccer. Soccer.
But why would you not call a game that you use playing your feet and a ball football?
Well, that's a good question.
I thought so I put it to these little experts.
If we used our hands, then we would call it football. But since we use our feet, it's not football. Because the balls have different names, and this ball is called a soccer ball. Soccer you use with your feet and you have socks on your feet. People in America, they wanted to make it American soccer.
Actually, it's not an American word. To find out the source, we spoke to the people who actually wrote a book about this. It all started when the first football rules were written in 1863 at this London pub, naming the sport Association Football. From there, Oxford students with a penchant for adding ER to words made it up.
At Oxford University, it was pretty much all the kind of semi-aristocracy at the time. So those kinds of people were associated with doing these kind of things. So they wouldn't call it breakfast, they'd call it brekker.
So in short, they couldn't really add an ER to the beginning of association, so they went with the middle part instead, soccer. They found evidence it was commonly used in the United Kingdom up to around the 70s, and then it just stopped.
It is such an interesting question, right? How a country or a culture decides to orphan one of its own words. We could not find a single parallel case of this. There are words that fall out of fashion, right? Or that used to be common and then we decide they're offensive and so they're taboo. But we cannot think of a single case where a country says, this is not our word.
Here in DC, the word is proudly claimed.
Soccer.
In American football, there are like 2 players that ever use their feet on this ball. So should it change? Would football make more sense? If you ask these kids, it's a unanimous nope, not in the USA. Patty Culhane, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Time now for our update on the Qatar FIFA World Cup 2022. On Thursday, Portugal won their match against Ghana 3-2. Brazil blanked Serbia 2-0. In today's fixtures, as at news time, Senegal beat Qatar 3-1 and Iran won their match against Wales 2-0. And that's the news on PBCJ. Thanks for watching.